Ladies and gentlemen, this is the ultimate guide to herpes disclosure. My name is Christopher. I have HSV2 down here. Let's get started. Method and time frames that are going to see in this video. So your dating app bio, dating app conversations, within the first conversation, on the first date, on the second date, as things could get physical, general texting, and then generally in person. Let's get started. So firstly is a disclaimer. So the perfect phrase, perfect time doesn't exist. If it does, I would sell it to you for thousands of dollars. How to disclose is a difficult question, but also extremely simple. Because the answer is you tell people you have herpes, it's not hard. Now, if it is hard, figure out why it's hard to talk about this thing. And when you make your HSV status just like your zodiac sign, because it's not hard to reveal that to someone because there's no shame around that, that's when you realize that disclosure isn't hard. Being okay with talking about it is the hard part. Nextly, realize what's in your control and what's not. Saying you have herpes, in your control. Your confidence, in your control. The person you're disclosing to's reaction, judgment, and decision is out of your control. But at the end of the day, as you get more comfortable talking about it, disclosing, and you disclose to 100 people versus one person, the chance of you finding someone or multiple people increases because the amount of fishing, you're fishing, and if you have more casts, you're going to get more fish. Next step. So initial tips. Detach from the label of herpes and what it says about you. I have a virus. I had chickenpox. Why am I not a slut? I don't know. And what does having herpes say about you? Because it might actually say a lot or nothing. And if it says nothing about you and you have to disclose, then you can never really be shamed for something because you don't still shame yourself for that. But how do I overcome my diagnosis and the shame? Watch this step-by-step guide to overcoming your diagnosis. Just search for that one on my YouTube channel. Nextly, make it harder for dates to say no. So basically, if you can actually outdo people who don't have herpes, you'll get more success with dating. But how can I make myself worthwhile? Watch the video, How to Become Someone That People Want to Date Despite Having Herpes. It's going to help you out. Nextly, practice admitting and talking about your status as easily as your name. So if the first time that you're telling anyone that you have herpes, even to yourself, is like your disclosure, it's going to suck. If you can't tell yourself that you have herpes in the bathroom mirror alone, you're not going to be able to tell someone in person. Nextly, realize everyone won't date us, but nothing changes post-diagnosis. So if you're a girl and you always got used by guys, maybe having this diagnosis now and disclosing is going to weed out the guys who are not there for you. Use it as a filter. It's a good one. Nextly, your dating app bio. So you can put in a dating app bio. You can be like, I like dogs and I have herpes. Because there's no need to have this built up pressure of disclosing. So you actually weeds people out before you even meet them. Now I know guys don't even look at dating apps. They're just like, oh, she's hot. Oh, she's hot. Oh, I didn't even know she was trans. Well, she's still hot. I just won't let the boys know. So it's like, put it out there, and it's going to actually establish honesty and open communication from the get-go. And it might also attract others who are also HSV positive. Now, the downsides, the italicized, is that some might not want the world to know their status. So it's like, how could I ever have it public? That would be so scary. But what part is scary though? Because people will put, I'm a liberal, and that to me is scary. Or I have different pronouns, and that to me is scary. But if you're confident about it, you can potentially let people know. But then again, too, you might not want everyone knowing. The other downside is it might scare more people off sooner because dating apps are so superficial. So maybe there's guys or girls that would get to know you despite having herpes and like you, but they might see, oh, herpes, and then automatically swipe left. So there's pros and cons to either. Let's move on to the next one. So this one is going to be on dating app conversation. So like the first message. So maybe you want to be like getting it out of the way early. So it's going to prevent any wasted time in case it's a deal breaker. So it's, hey, I believe in communication. What's up? I like to get to know you. First things first, I also have HSV. Just want to let you know in case blah, 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 blah. So there's less emotional investment this way because you're not like falling in love with them and you're not like getting so attached that it actually hurts. Now, with this being said, like it might scare more people away sooner because again, they're so superficial. And then you might also get like ghosted because if your first message involves herpes, it's, am I going to get it from reading the app? Probably not. But Just keep these things in mind when it comes to considering disclosing as a first message. So within the first conversation, whether it's on dating apps or whether it's on like texting, you can gauge who you want to disclose to this way. So it's like if you're talking and they seem closed-minded or they seem like iffy about things, you can decide, do I want to disclose to this person? What's their vibe? And then again, too, there is less emotional investment this way, and there's less time wasted if it's like within the first conversation. But then again, too, the same options is like ghosting might happen, or you might scare them off sooner if they might be a good candidate long term. But this might actually be like one of the good options because there's a balance of gauging who you can tell, but then also not falling in love. So to be honest, like this might be a decent option for everybody to consider when it comes to disclosing, which is like first conversation, once you have a bit of a connection and once you gauge like they're not a serial killer. But let's move on to more options. So on the first date, now I only suggest you do this if you're getting physical or if it's coming up organically in the conversation. Maybe it's a joke, maybe it's a story. So on the first date, it's going to save extra time for you both because you might not get to a second date or something. The other good side is the other positive is that no one's going to fall in love on a first date. So there is like less emotional investment. And if you are falling in love on the first date, that's a bit of a red flag. Now, the downside is they don't really know you that well yet. So they might be like, no thanks, even if they would get to know you and have a better connection with you. Nextly is you might not even like them or trust them enough yet. So it's, do I even trust this person to disclose? And then the other thing is like, you might have them be like, well, you should have told me before. And it's like, well, bro, like, why would I tell you before when I don't even know if you're stupid? You should have told me that you're stupid before. And if you have someone who's like aggressive, just public place, best option for that kind of disclosure. Nextly is a second date. So this is going to allow you to both actually reach a second date, which for me, a lot don't, whether it's them, whether it's me. You can actually gauge, oh, does this person like me enough to want to see me again? That's cool. And then with this being said, there is that increased connection, but there still isn't like weeks or months invested into building attraction with each other, because then it's, oh, herpes. Oh, this was a waste of time. And then there also could be like some physicality implied at some point. So at that point, it seems more like natural to discuss sexual health. However, like the only downside would be then like wasted time if you talk for a while. So sometimes you have a first date and then your second date isn't for like weeks. And it's like, well, you've kind of wasted that time for you and wasted that time for them if there's a huge gap between first and second dates. Nextly is as things could get physical. Now, do as I say, not what I do. However, I have done this successfully twice, but it's not advisable as a planned thing. So if you get to a point and it like has to happen, obviously disclose before you get physical. But if you're like, I'm going to disclose before we have sex, don't plan that because it's a little bit too long. Now, if you're super confident, you can turn your disclosure into a mature conversation about sexual health. Okay, oh, it seems like we're going to get physical now. Let's go over sexual health. I'm positive for HSV2. Do you know your herpes status? If you can approach the disclosure in that way, then it can seem natural. And if they're still like, oh, herpes, like I ain't got no time for that, then they're not the kind of person that you even want to probably sleep with. You don't assume they have chlamydia, but if they're so off put by STIs and testing, who knows what they have? Keep that in mind. The cons to this is that sometimes things can heat up too quickly and like slips your mind. So people are like, Pickering Fitness, I had sex, I didn't disclose because things are getting physical. You don't want to let that happen. You want to give people like the chance to also think clearly, because some people are like, some horny guys are just like, I don't care. And then they wake up the next morning, they're like, I probably shouldn't have done that. It's not a good mindset for either of you to approach disclosure just as you're getting physical. And then the other scary thing is it's going to be super awkward if you disclose in the bedroom half naked and they're like, no thanks. And then you have to like put your clothes back on and both awkwardly leave. Doesn't sound fun to me. Nextly is via text in general. So it's sometimes easier to explain without breaking down or making it a big deal. So if you're still like super emotional, like I have herpes, like it can be helpful to be like typing it out, processing it, and then sending it and stuff instead of doing it in person. And you can plan it out and that sort of thing. And I advise this if you and your partner are texting a lot. So if you're someone who only texts to meet up, don't do it this way because it's going to seem out of the blue. But if you're like always texting each other, This can be like just something that comes up in conversation. Now, the downsides is that it's easier to get ghosted. So you disclose on text and they're just like nothing. Days, years, decades. You never hear from them again. That's a possibility. It's an easy out for them to not have to engage with you. It's also going to make it harder to actually have an efficient discussion about it, because like in person, you can just like efficiently have a conversation and engage more emotionally than like, what is herpes? That sounds awful. So pros and cons to both of these. Nextly is like in person, generally speaking. So this is like the opposite, where if you talk in person more than texting, this will seem more normal. And this is going to be like an easier time to connect, to gauge their response, and like truly see how they react. Now, maybe they're going to keep their mouth shut and be like, yeah, like that seems cool, but then ghost you. It's kind of hard, which is like the con here, which is some might hide their true emotions. There's pros and cons. Now, when you're doing this, it's best to find like simple ways to talk about it in conversation and almost like fake it till you make it. Finding ways to bring it up casually or confidently or things like that, so that it can just like fake this confidence about yourself. Now, the only downside to this is you got to actually be super comfortable with yourself to bring it up casually and confidently. So if you don't know how to do that, I suggest go watch the video, exact step-by-step process to overcome your diagnosis. It's going to help you get more in tune with being okay with this as your situation now. And lastly, tips for success. Make sure the first time you're admitting you have herpes out loud isn't your first disclosure. Go in the mirror alone. Tell yourself you have it. Admit it. Accept it. Realize that the more that you push it away, the harder it's going to be to actually like bring it out in public with a real person. Nextly, remember that discussing this should be normal, but no one seems to worry about it until after. So ideally, every human being should discuss sexual health before getting physical, but it's not normal, even if the abnormal thing is going to hinder us or harm us. We're stupid people, all of us. Nextly, 70 to 80% of the world has HSV. Ignorance doesn't trump the truth. Most people have HSV. Both types can infect the genitals. You just happen to know, and you just happen to want to be honest and open with your partners. And that's a good thing. Nextly, use it as a filter to find someone worthwhile. You don't have to date idiots. You don't have to date judgmental people. You don't have to date people who don't want to learn about you or see you for more than your diagnosis. Realize that instead of looking at it as I'm getting rejected, look at it as this is a really good way to find someone who's worth my time. And remember that you're still you with all your value. And if you have no value, go get some. Watch the video, How to Become Someone That People Want to Date Despite Having Herpes. It's going to be good. And lastly, if you hold no shame, no one can shame you for it. Remember that. And if you're looking for extra help to get rid of that full shame, I actually have a full guide on disclosures. So like 40 plus easy to use scripts that you can use at each of those different time frames. It's going to be within the private community. Second link in the description. And if you're serious about getting a handle on your diagnosis, the first link in the description is going to take you to my page where you can book a call and talk to me, and we'll figure this out and we'll get you back to living your best life. Okay? Love you, miss you, hope you're doing well. See you guys next time.